welcome to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
And I am Adam Summers, and you are in season 4 of Wrestling at Random, where, if you've been paying attention, I've told you that the theme of season 4 is that there is more stuff in the randomizer, more shows, more promotions, more territories than any other season in the past. We stuffed it full. It's brimming with professional wrestling action. That's resulted in some different things this season, and maybe in so many different ways of the definition different. Is that never more true than it is this week as we are reviewing an episode of Wrestling Society X.
Wrestling Society X. You are correct. The randomizer is busting at the seams. For those who don't know how this works, we went and scoured the internet for all of the wrestling content out there on Peacock, WWE Network, YouTube, all kinds of stuff. We just loaded up the randomizer with it. We fire it up, and it will randomly choose something for us to watch. We watch it. Everything in the randomizer is at least 10 years old, and we've had some deep cuts and some pulls going all the way back to the 50s to here, where we're looking at 2007. Wrestling Society X debuted January 30th, 2007 on MTV, music television. MTV decided in 2007 to get into the wrestling business. This is right around the time where WWE's Your Only Game in Town, they're about to launch their version of ECW. And that's all that's going on in the US right now. So MTV is ready to get into the wrestling game. Oh, TNA exists, but
They just exist
TNA,
as they've done for basically their entire history. They just existed. They were not a factor. It is fascinating that MTV, who was in many ways the catalyst for the professional wrestling boom of the mid 80s, here, this is the time that they decide to go all in on professional wrestling. It's not doing a deal with WWF in the mid 80s to have a regular show, or they had Sunday Night Heat for a little bit, but that didn't really go anywhere. You would have figured maybe they'd go a little bit more all in during a boom period. No, this is, as you mentioned, a dry period for pro wrestling in the United States, and MTV throws their hat in the ring, and the result is something that we'll talk about in a lot of detail as we go through. I guess the best way I could describe this, if someone has never heard of Wrestling Society X, is that this is Lucha Underground before Lucha Underground existed, for better or worse.
Yeah, it's Lucha Underground before Lucha Underground existed. It's kind of the best of the indies. It's like a lot of like, hey, these were the guys from ROH and PWG and some of the
IWA
CZW.
Mid-South. There'll be a couple of guys. There'll be one guy in particular on the show that I had completely forgotten about, who I was a big fan of and actually hung out with a little bit back in the day. We'll see him a little bit later in a tag team match.
So the way this went down was they taped 10 shows for the first season. All shows were written by Kevin Kleinrock with help from Cody Michaels, Vampiro, and friend of the show, Dr. Keith Lipinski.
Yes, friend of the show. Not only friend of the show, the only reason that you are hearing me on this podcast right now is it was Dr. Keith who discovered me walking around an ROH show wearing a New Japan Pro Wrestling t-shirt and said, "Hey, can you talk?" I said, "I think maybe." And he invited me to audition for the PPH, the Pro Wrestling Power Hour, which I somehow, along with Mike Coughlin, won the audition for that. And I have, for better or worse, as I used that phrase earlier, been doing podcasting ever since. So you have me or you have Keith to either thank or blame for me being here.
Yeah, and to this day, we still hang out with Keith as we were just in a box for the AEW show here in Chicago. He's a Chicago native as well. So if you're listening to this, we are in the free feed. There will be bonus content where we will interview Keith Lipinski to talk more about Wrestling Society X. We will we have lots of questions coming out of this show. So we will do a deeper dive in a special bonus episode over in the bonus feed. We have over at patreon.com/wrestling at random, or in your Apple podcast feed, you click the subscribe button there. It unlocks all the bonus content. We do a bonus show there every single week. That's completely different, all evergreen content. So it's all stuff that's new to you if you haven't been a subscriber yet. So all of that will be there. We will try to be getting an interview up with Keith Lipinski to go a little bit deeper into his experience with Wrestling Society X. Let's talk a little bit about the rosters. So this roster largely consists of indie guys and larger names from companies such as Ring of Honor, Dragon Gate, PWG, XPW, and CZW. The
And you
complete
mentioned
roster.
X. We also have X Pac was in the title match on the previous episode against Vampiro.
Yeah, I'll run down some of the people on this roster. Six Pac, who's Sean Waltman, X Pac, as you mentioned. Aaron Aguilera, the former Jesus from WWE. Alcatraz, Eric Cannon. Uh, you've got Disco Machine. You've got El Jefe. Human Tornado, who was the current PWG champion at the time. Jack Evans, Jimmy Jacobs, Joey Ryan, Johnny Webb, Josh Raymond. You've got Lizzie Valentine, Luke Hawk, Marcus Riot, Colt Cabana under a mask as Matt Classic. We'll get into a lot of that later. Matt Cross, Matt Seidel, Nate Webb, Nick Grimes, Quicksilver, Ricky Banderas, Ruckus, Scorpio Sky, Teddy Hart, Tyler Black, the future Seth Rollins, Vampiro, Vic Grimes, and Youth Suicide.
Yeah, it's a real eclectic mix. And I think maybe the most noteworthy thing about it from a roster construction standpoint is that you have a lot of the big name East Coast indie guys, a lot of the big name Midwest indie guys. And you think about an Eric Cannon certainly falling into that part of the equation, and then a lot of West Coast guys as well. And you didn't get that on a whole lot of other shows. So whatever else this was, completely ridiculous and absurd, it was cool to see that mix because you didn't get that anywhere else.
We are reviewing the fourth episode of the series.
The third.
We're reviewing the third episode of the series.
I know you wanted to do the fourth as well. You wanted to do a double shot here because you enjoyed Wrestling Society X so much. I consulted with Dr. Keith and I said, would it be okay if we did 2 episodes? He said, I was a part of this. I think you guys can only handle 1. And so I took his advice and communicated it on to you.
He's right. We reviewed the third episode. Fun fact about the fourth episode. The fourth episode of the series was pulled by MTV because of a spot featuring Ricky Banderas throwing a fireball at Vampiro, which was deemed unairable by MTV.
Well, I fast forwarded to skim episode 4 after we recorded, or after we watched that episode, and I saw that spot. It should be deemed unairable because it looks so terrible. He throws the fireball and then it turns into like this weird like animation filter. It looks awful. I don't know if they didn't air it because they thought it was too graphic. This didn't look graphic at all. I've seen fireballs thrown on TV in 2022. I saw them thrown on TV when I was a 5-year-old watching wrestling from the South. This was none of those things. I wouldn't have aired it just because it looked so bad.
It aired in edited form on February 27th of 2007. That show did a 0.55 rating, 535,000 viewers. Shortly thereafter, it was said that MTV had made the decision to cancel the show.
Was it what time of day did this air? Because I'm sure it got re-aired a million times. I remember watching it like in the afternoon, like almost in that like old global ESPN time slot is my recollection of when I watched it.
They aired it many times, so it premiered in like the later primetime times, but then it would air all throughout the week at on MTV and MTV2.
I was gonna say, I think I remember watching it quite a bit on MTV too for its short run.
The communication between MTV WSX was said to be virtually non-existent, which is one of the reasons things had fallen apart. March 14th, 2007, episode 9 aired, drawing a point 0.3 rating. Episode 9 was the last episode to air on MTV. Episode 10, the finale of the entire series, never aired.
Wow. Is it
Yeah,
in the collection that you
it
reference,
is.
or okay, so it
Yeah,
is
it's in the DVD complete set. You can see the episode 10 finale that never aired.
the thrilling conclusion of Wrestling Society X. I am intrigued again. Like I said, I have vague
I
memories of
watched this
watching
live.
this.
No, I never missed an episode. So
Wow, so you watched all of it. I think
I watched it. Yeah.
I may have watched the first two and then stopped after the first two. So I don't think I ever saw this episode. I remember being excited. I remember watching it, and I remember thinking, man, it's like all my guys, and this isn't for me.
No, it was absolutely for me because I I like if if you're gonna try to be serious wrestling and then you're gonna do wacky stuff, it's usually not for me. Like it's like pick a lane and
Yeah.
like sprinkle some stuff in there. That's cool. Like I'm fine with like some comedy here and there and in my serious stuff as long as it's like not the formula. As long as it's not a formula, it's just like dropped in there. It's cool. But like these guys came out and were like we're insanity. Like we're just gonna
Absurdist
do
professional wrestling.
yes, and I will steer into that to that skid, and I will be like, well, all right, I know what I'm in for. We're all signing up for the same thing. Let's get weird. And I loved it because it was such a different product. I was looking for something as a WWE alternative, right? I'm looking for some additional wrestling in my life. And I had CMLL. If you go back to our CMLL episode we reviewed here, like that was earlier in the 2000s. This is 2007, so I've been a few years out of lucha, and so this was this kind of scratched that itch of like just like fun weird. I also enjoyed the first like season or two of Lucha Underground as well, so like
Yeah.
I like the absurdist stuff when we're all on the same page and you're not trying to surprise me with absurdist
Yes.
things.
Yeah.
uh
When the contract, the social contract is made between viewer and television company right away that this is what it is. We all know what we're getting when we walk in the door. As you were saying that, really kind of my best description of this as we go through is that it's a TV show of what video game wrestling would look like if real people were doing it.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it because yeah, I could totally have seen this being like a super popular arcade style video game
Yes.
where guys are doing crazy stuff
Even down to
and
the arena that they're doing it in. It's like
right.
a set in a like a side-scrolling fighting game or a wrestling game.
Yeah, so definitely it had those vibes. We've got Brett Ernst and Chris Kloss welcoming us to the show. Ernst was hired explicitly because MTV wanted a quote MTV type pretty face on the show. He uh, he said that the team ended up working well together with Kloss as the expert and Ernst as the smartass fan guy.
Yeah, and Klaus was one of the voices, I believe, of XPW. That's his background, if I remember correctly. I can't believe we've not reviewed an episode of XPW TV, by the way. It's
Don't
the only.
the randomizers listening, be quiet. It might hear us. They show us the first Wrestling Society X title match, which took place the week prior between Vampiro and Sean Waltman, X Pac, where Vampiro wins with a tombstone into a coffin that had pyro exploding next to it, and Vampiro becomes the first WSX champion.
A tombstone through an exploding coffin. This was our first exposure to the special effects that you would see on Wrestling Society X. You would have some actual like in arena pyro that would go off. And they would also do, I believe, maybe Keith will correct us when we talk to him, but they would do post-produced visual effects, making the explosions work or look even more explodey. So yeah, it's another way that this feels very different from regular professional wrestling. The other thing, which we should just get out of the way right now, is the fashion corner on the show, on the
Sure.
set, because this is not in a wrestling arena. This is not a building that people bought tickets to come into. While I assume some of the people here were wrestling fans, they are here as extras. It appears
It
as
was a
though,
legit cast. It was a legit casting call,
yes,
which was mocked pretty hard by the 2007 internet wrestling community.
and
That's for sure.
it's noticeable. Like, it appears that there are actual wrestling fans scattered through, but they will go over and over again to reaction shots of the same people, most of them like women in their mid to early 20s, and their reactions are so sort of over the top or person acting type of reactions. And so that's, it's a hot crowd, but it's also a fake hot crowd. And so
Very.
it's,
Yeah.
it kind of throws you, because in one sense you hear the noise, it's like, oh, this is a hot product, but then you pay attention a little bit and you're like, oh, well, this is all not actual real crowd reactions, even though it's people making the sound. Like, it's not the Thunder Heat Machine, it's just a casting call reacting like a casting call.
I would have. I'm curious. I'd love to talk to like some of the non wrestling fans that answered a casting call for this.
Yes.
That were watching like some really talented folks do some really cool stuff, and like
Had no idea.
yeah, and just like what like this that's the guy. I wonder if it ended up hooking anyone to be a wrestling fan seeing this stuff
Or like
live
what
because
their
it was so different.
expectation.
Like
Yeah, it's completely different from anything that was on TV at that point. And it's a lot of guys that, that were wrestling in front of a couple hundred people in whatever indies they were wrestling in, up and down the country. Like, other than Ring of Honor, you really didn't have places where people were wrestling in front of huge crowds. Like, going to IWA Mid South, I'd see the top guys in the world, at least in the US, and they're wrestling in front of a couple hundred people. So almost no one was familiar with any of these guys, even if they were a casual wrestling fan, much less just a random person answering a casting call.
we get a promo with Vampiro. He's somewhere in the building with a bunch of candles, very very creepy looking set, and
There's a
he's talking.
skull. He's got candles arranged around a skull. He's talking about he'll sacrifice and suffer for the WSX title. This is Vampiro doing a 1995 Raven promo with 2007 visual effects.
He looked super cool.
Oh, yeah.
Vampiro looks cool, and he's in a cool looking setup, and he cuts a really good promo. And so
He's perfect for this product. Vampiro, the problem is at some point he has to get in the ring. And that's where the issues start to come in, especially this late in his career. But as a guy that this show is all about the sizzle rather than the steak. And this is all about just looking cool and quick hits and looking like something that should be on MTV. This promo from Vampiro, it clicks all those boxes.
yeah, I thought this was awesome. The band Sparta joins the commentary team.
Oh, God.
They the formula here was that a band would perform and then they would watch the wrestling. So as part of this, obviously we did not get to see the musical performance.
So did the band perform on the MTV
Yes,
broadcast?
correct. On
Okay.
the MTV broadcast, they
So
would
it's
perform.
interesting that in the DVD version, they didn't have rights to the
No, those are
music.
all edited out. Yeah.
Yeah, because that was when I was watching this. I'm like, so were these guys the dark match? Was their performance the dark match? Or it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot in it for them, but that answers that question.
The ring announcer is Fabian Callen, and he is super pumped. He's running around the ring, yelling and screaming.
I have never hated anything more in my life than Fabian Kalin as ring announcer on this show. I could not deal with this. He's a guy that looks like who's that guy? Matt Pin, whatever that was
Matt
on MTV.
Pinfield.
He looks like a more jacked up version of Matt Pinfield running around the ring, holding a microphone, not realizing he's holding it because he is screaming at the top of his lungs. It's every indie ring announcer that I've ever seen and hated in my life rolled into one here on this show.
I've hated worse ring announcers. Yeah,
I would take Justin Roberts over
no,
this
stop
guy.
it.
That's how much
Stop
I
it.
dislike this guy.
uh, we then get a crawl at the bottom of the screen.
Yes.
What you're about to see contains death defying stunts performed by insane professional wrestlers. These stunts should not be attempted at home, or anywhere else for that matter. Enjoy. Apparently, this crawl was written by Keith Lipinski. So
Nice.
we'll ask him about that later.
I wish there was a t-shirt with just that crawl on it, like wrapping around from front to back. I would wear that to a show.
Pyro flames go off as we're ready for our first match. And nobody's more excited that this match is one fall for a 10-minute time limit than Fabian Kalin,
Oh my
as he's
God.
screaming the introductions for the Trailer Park Boys with White Trash Johnny Webb. They come out and we get a graphic card that shows who they are, their signature move, being the swinging lung blower, which we did not get to see, so I do not know what that move is.
Well, the lung blower is like a back cracker or whatever, and so I assume it's a double team version of that. That is one of the main moves of Josh Raymond, who's the tag partner of Spider Nate Webb and the Trailer Park Boys. This is where I got excited because these are my IWA Mid South guys. Spider Nate Webb goes way back to even before I was going to IWA shows. Josh Raymond wrestled before that as Josh Abercrombie. I was a huge fan of this dude in IWA. Fun high flyer, great guy. One of the like underutilized, unsung, just really solid, nice guys in pro wrestling. That was also a really fun wrestler. I had no recollection of this team being in Wrestling Society X. I was excited when they came out.
Their opponents, M-Dog 20, who's Matt Cross, and his partner Teddy Hart. They are called the Filth and the Fury.
Wow. And yeah, I would think it would just be that's the name for Teddy Hart. And then M-Dog 20, Matt Cross, is also his partner. Teddy Hart, a guy who, you could do podcasts, documentaries.
There's a whole documentary on it on Peacock at this moment.
Documentary series. What a weird, just strange dude that had the world at his feet, but was completely insane, among many other things. And yeah, we'll see from a wrestling standpoint that on display as we go forward in this match.
Their signature move is the Shooting Star Press. The match starts and they are moving. Everybody's going a million miles an hour.
Video game wrestling, as I said earlier, there's no feeling out process. There is nary a transition move on this show. You will not see headlocks. You will not see stalling. This is move, 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 move. It is button mashing in real life.
Yeah, I mean, we cross with a drop kick. He follows it up with a top rope split-legged moonsault. Teddy Hart hits a cradle DDT, and they go outside. And Teddy Hart hits a giant Asai moonsault,
Huge,
a corkscrew
awesome
moonsault by Cross, like action, action, action.
Yeah, and this all happened in the span of maybe 30 seconds. That top rope moonsault by Teddy Hart was unreal. Like, imagine the way Kurt Angle would do his moonsault, where it's just a million miles up in the air and then straight down. That's Teddy Hart doing this, but off a springboard to the floor. And then, like you said, M-Dog follows it up with a corkscrew. We are off and running. I feel like not even that does justice to the pace these guys are setting right away.
No, just more big moves. Cross with a springboard double foot stomp for 2. And then Teddy Hart and one of the guys are brawling off to the side. They're outside the ring. They're like over in another area away from the ring. And Teddy Hart pulls wires from like a production area and proceeds to electrocute one of the trailer park boys.
Nate Webb gets electrocuted by Teddy Hart. We get the kind of fake sparks in arena. It appeared as though there was some post production sparks added as well, and there's a table set up in this area. So who knows what's coming next?
Teddy Hart starts pouring water on the guy, and I'm like, he's gonna electrocute him again. And sure
Yes,
enough, he takes the wire. Pyros go off again as he electrocutes the guy while he's on the table. Pyros
I
going
had
off. This
I
is
had flashbacks to Raw with Kane and Shane McMahon and the
no,
car battery and the jumper cables and Shane McMahon's groin.
no.
I This was even crazier than that. This is
But this was
ridiculous.
fun. That was ridiculous. This was fun because again, we're turning into the skid. We're going completely absurdist and like we're gonna electrocute this guy. And I'm like, and I was totally like, yeah, he's going to electrocute this guy. Smart move, putting the water on there, and great
Yes.
stuff.
Because
And
again, this is video game wrestling. Like I fully expected after that happened for Spider-Knight Webb's body to blink 3 times and disappear.
yes, this was tremendous. I was like, I was having a great time watching it. And as Cross hits a top rope Frankensteiner in the ring, we cut then back to Teddy Hart over in the other area. He's climbed up to some platform high above this table, and he does a corkscrew senton off of some platform, putting Webb through a table in the ring at the
Did we
same
get
time.
more sparks? I feel like we got more sparks there too. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just imagining things. I'm giving them more credit than it's worth. But this was wild.
In the ring, Cross hits a shooting star leg drop off the top and gets the victory. If you were wondering what Wrestling Society X was here in episode 3, if you're turning it on for the first time, this match quickly told you what you're in for.
Yes.
And yeah, I was I'm like, this is right. This is great. It was great fun. Nonstop. Uh it was all empty calories, and I enjoyed
Yes.
every single minute of it. Like
Well,
I'm like,
it's
give
turn
me
your
my next
brain
sugar
off.
hit.
It's turn your brain off wrestling. You don't watch it to give it a star rating.
No,
It's
it's
it
for
is
fun.
again,
Just
it's a bag of sour gummy worms in a wrestling form. And I think also weren't these shows only a half hour long? If I remember, they were shorter than your normal, or maybe they were 45 minutes. They were not a full hour
right.
because here, and granted, there's no commercials, but without the bands, it's like 20 minutes.
Yep. Yeah.
So I'm assuming the band does like one song and that's it.
Backstage, you've got Joey Chaos Munoz and Aaron Jesus Aguilera
Who
backstage.
you told me that Jesus Aaron Aguilera is in WWE.
He
I
was.
have no recollection of this whatsoever. I don't know if this is a statement on my memory or that I was even more checked out from WWE than usual during this time period, but I do not remember this whatsoever.
He was in WWE. He was Carlitos heavy and like was involved in the angle where John Cena was stabbed because he had to go away to make, I think, the Marine one of his movies. And yeah, he was the heavy for Carlito, but then would eventually lose and just got cut and never really did anything in WWE. But
I'm shocked he hasn't come up on one of these random mid 2000s WWE shows we've watched. So there you go. I'll remember, I guess, when we see him doing something really interesting on an episode of SmackDown from 2006.
yeah, we're gonna get an '06 SmackDown, and that's what's exactly gonna happen. Yes. So backstage, these guys are tag team partners. They're trying to get on the same page, and Lucha Underground, and Wrestling Society X, and TNA, and all these companies, all have very similar tag team partners that can't get along problems. Like
Yes.
that's that's okay to do like once in a while, but it's become such a trope now, and it's something that, and when you see it more than one time on a show, you're like, can nobody have friends or be a team? Like this is one of those scenarios, but they're in watching other episodes of this series, it's a common pattern that they also had, but it happens to the best of them. A lot of companies deal with this.
It's a trope, and it's one of those things that, well, obviously Vince Russo was booking one of the companies that you mentioned, TNA, for part of that time period, but I also just think it's what everybody saw the industry leader doing at a time when the industry leader was successful, even though those stories really weren't what was making that company successful. So everybody did it because they thought that's what you do. It's something you can, like, to me, it's something maybe you do every couple years, but you don't need to do it every couple segments on the same show.
No, I like if it didn't end up every single time with them breaking up, right? If it
Yes.
wasn't a way just to break somebody up, if it was actually like if it was actually like these two guys don't get along, but they're like they're like a band that don't get along, but together they make great music. So
And make money. They
they're
stay together.
professional together and they stay together because they can't stop the success. And
Yes.
so they put their differences aside to be successful, but man, they can't stand each other. And
Or you have the story where it's the tag team partners that were together for a while. They got along. Something happens. They're on the verge of breaking up. It seems like they hate each other. And then somehow, some way, maybe it's from, another heel that's even more dastardly than one of these guys seems like they're about to be. They end up rekindling their friendship, rediscovering, yes, we make a great team, and they get back together stronger than ever. I'd love to see that sometime too. But instead, like you said, really the only option we ever get is guys bicker, they feud. One goes on to do something, one doesn't, or more often than not, neither guy goes on to do anything of note afterward.
And again, that is a discussion for another show. Wrestling Society X, not why we're here, not why you called. Here, here we've just established these are bickering teammates, and they set up a tables, ladders, and cervezas match later. A TLC match is set up
Considering
for
all the
later in the show.
discussion of cervezas and mamacitas in this, I'm shocked it was not a TLCM match, but they just went with the TLC. So yeah, that we're not really told whether this will be just tables, ladders, and chairs where you have to pull something down from the roof of the building, from the ceiling of the building, and that's how you win, or is this just going to be pinfall? I assume maybe Fabian will scream the rules at us before the match starts. I guess we'll find out.
Back to the ring. El Hombre Blanco and Mascarado, aka the white man in the mask, comes out. His card says he's PWG Tag Team Champion. You would know him as Quicksilver in PWG. And his signature move, the Silverado. His opponent,
I love, by the way, moves that when you hear what they are, you
you
have
don't know what
no
they're.
earthly idea what this is. This could be a Rana, it could be a rock bottom, it could be a headlock. No idea.
His opponent, Jack Evans. That Jack Evans, you had seen him on every indie show you've ever been to around this time period. That guy was working everywhere at this time.
He was the
And
GIF wrestler before there were GIFs. I mean,
yep,
think about some of those crazy dives, some of those crashes and burns on Ring of Honor shows. That stuff made the rounds around the internet. He, in so many ways, is kind of like the prototypical Wrestling Society X wrestler here, in 2007, even several years prior, kind of pioneering the style that so many of these guys are doing on the show, where it's a million miles an hour breakneck dives, no transitions, just getting reactions.
yeah, Jack Evans is a perfect wrestler for this, and I think this match was put on here to be a showcase
Oh,
for
absolutely.
Jack Evans to be one of these stars. His signature move, of course, the 630 splash. Jack does some breakdancing, but Ombre attacks him mid dance. And then we get a springboard clothesline that turns Jack Evans inside out. Fisherman Buster, and we get a 2 count. The crowd trying to rally behind Jack. They're chanting for Jack Evans.
Well, they are, but again, when they go to these crowd shots, it's actors acting badly, trying to act like wrestling fans, and it totally takes you out of it. But the sounds are great. It sounds like they're hyped for this. Sounds like they're all about Jack Evans.
Evans does a springboard full flip back elbow. He gets a 2 count. A jumping knee by Jack Evans. This was great.
He basically invented Kenny Omega's V trigger here.
He goes to the top and kills Ombre with a 630 senton for the pin. This looked brutal.
The 630 is such a terrifying move. Obviously, as you said, for the guy who's taking it because of the centrifugal force and depending on where your body lands on the guy. But man, every time I see Jack Evans do it, and he almost 99.9% of the time lands it perfectly, but it's one of those moves where there is no margin for error. If you under rotate or over rotate, it's a broken neck. I'm amazed that he's done this move so many times and it's still walking.
They show more highlights of guys flipping around doing moves. And then we cut to a Matt Classic vignette.
Yes.
We're told, beware of his, quote, full body slam and judo chop.
I love the judo chop. How often have we talked about on the show the ridiculousness of calling a chop a judo chop, as if anyone in the history of judo has thrown a chop in the middle of a match?
As far as comedy gimmicks go, Colt Cabana as Matt Classic is a funnier idea than anything Colt Cabana does as Colt Cabana.
100%. I am on the record as a guy who, even though I've watched him wrestle live and on TV for, God, just about 20 years, I've never gotten the whole Colt Cabana thing. It just is so one note to me. You see it once, you don't need to see it again. This, I could watch for the rest of my life. This man doing the Matt Classic gimmick with this voiceover guy talking about judo chops. The announcer, so after this video feature plays, and it's great, the announcers explain that Matt Classic was in a car accident 40 years ago, was in a coma, just woke up, and doesn't realize that wrestling isn't old school anymore. What a perfect origin story for everything you talked about what this show is, absurdist professional wrestling that does not try to be serious. Tremendous.
No, I'm immediately picturing that, like, he's been in a coma in his gear and just
in
like
his mask.
Yeah, and just like woke up from his coma ready to go. And this is great.
Put a collar and elbow on the doctor as he was leaning over him and just got out of the hospital.
Yeah, and at the beginning of the vignette, naming off like Frank Gotch and Farmer Burns and all these old timey wrestlers. This was fantastic.
Yes, this is perfect.
We then get an introduction for the TLC match.
The tension has been building. The tempers have been flaring. And tonight, it all comes to a head. Bring out the tables. Bring out the ladders. And bring out the cerveza. Because this is a TLC tables, ladders, and cerveza match. Coming to the ring first. They are out of bail and out of control. Luke Hawx and Alcatraz.
Now these guys are what they call bad mode.
I assume, as we record this, Jeremy, there was a pause. I assume that means you are going to ensure that I will not go back and listen to this podcast because you are inserting Fabian's doing the reintroductions for this. I hope everyone turned the volume down about 15 notches on their phone or their computer or wherever they're listening so their eardrums weren't blown out by this fool.
Alcatraz and Luke Hawx. So it's Alcatraz, Alkatrazz, and Luke Hawx, Hawx. So
that means it's
forgot we're in the mid 2000s. Yeah, in case you forgot, that's how you spelled things.
I also like Alcatraz with the 2 Z's. It makes me feel like he has kinship with WWE Taz.
And their signature move, the Romper Stomper. Any idea what the Romper Stomper is going to be, Adam?
I think it was the move that one wrestling buddy in my bedroom did to another wrestling buddy to win the imaginary championship in my head when I was 5 years old.
Their opponents, Los Pochos Guapos Joey Chaos Munoz, Aaron Jesus Aguilera, their signature move, the Guapos Especial.
That tells us nothing, which is par for the course here at the signature moves on this show. From a size perspective for each of these teams, we should note that Alcatraz is a giant man.
Yes.
Luke Hawx is every mid-2000s indie wrestler you've ever seen. Whereas on the other side, Jesus, Aaron Aguilera is the bigger of the two, but Chaos is nowhere near as scrawny as Luke Hawx, I would say.
The match starts with fighting on the floor. A ladder shot immediately on the outside to start the match.
2.5 seconds into this match, we have like a reverse ladder shot.
Alcatraz is putting the ladder into the ring. It's about halfway in when Aguilera in the ring launches Luke into the air. He comes down on the ladder, hitting himself on the ladder and teeter-tottering it up so that it hits Alcatraz, who was on the floor at the same time.
Again, this is about 18 seconds into the match.
In the ring, Chaos was going to the top, but Aguilera pulls his partner down, says, "Go to the top of the ladder." Aguilera is now distracted. He's flirting with a woman at ringside.
Incorrect. The announcer tells he is flirting with the Mamacitas, which I feel like someone is getting royalties off of that being said every time here on this show. I guess since we had Eddie Guerrero constantly saying that a few years prior, that was the word of the day on this show.
Chaos comes off, missed a moonsault off the ladder. We get a slingshot into a ladder. Then the camera cuts right to a flatliner by Luke Hawx. So in this match, these quick cut camera shots are even more prevalent here because there's so much action going on.
It's still easier to follow than modern WWE, though, because yes, we have the quick.
I have
cuts,
that in my notes exactly. I'm
the
like,
camera isn't shaking violently around and zooming in and out. Because the worst thing with WWE when they do that, it's always bad. But when you've got a guy who's stopping a guy 6 times and the camera's got to go up and down and up and down and up and down, we don't have any of that here.
They do it, but not like for every impact.
They do
on
for
a
the
move.
explosions. The
Yeah, they
literal
do it for like
explosions.
yes, they do it for like certain things, and it's like okay, that's okay. But like yeah, modern WWE with their quick cuts and constant zoom in and shaking is unbearable at most times. But
I always
this was if you want to know what a tasteful way to do it is, it's this.
Yes. Whereas the WWE version of it is like, I use this analogy all the time, and maybe the show's a little bit dated, but whenever I watch or try to watch WWE, it looks as though whoever produced and directed the TV show The Shield is doing WWE production, where it's just nothing's ever still. You never can focus on anything.
Alcatraz walks the top rope, tries a tornado DDT, but it's countered into a Northern Lights suplex, throwing Alcatraz into the ladder that's leaning up against the corner. Luke Hawx turns around and Chaos hits a move. How would you describe this move? It's like a greeting from Asbury Park or a Rikishi driver.
Yeah, kind of reverse, though. It really, the closest way to describe it is the move that Brody King uses as his finisher. They call the Gonzo Bomb, which is a take on, it's not exactly the same, but a take on the Ganso Bomb that's in the Misawa Kawada match that everyone knows about, I'm sure is listening. But yeah, it is brutal. It's basically like a folding pile driver out of a power bomb position. Nasty stuff here. Looks like it should be the finish, and it isn't.
No, because Chaos brings in a table. So we've had our ladders, we've now got our tables, and Aguilera says, use the cervezas. So he goes and gets the beer bottles. Aguilera gets sent into his partner. Chaos ends up going face first into the bottles of beer that are set down in the middle of the ring. He's now bleeding. The Sparta guys on commentary, the band Sparta guys, are like, this is, quote, straight edge hardcore versus DC hardcore. I'm going to say he's wrong in his analysis.
I would say he's wrong on all points of his analysis. These guys were unintentionally hilarious throughout. At one point during the opener, they start talking about how this match reminds them of the Von Erichs and World Class Championship Wrestling. I'm like, There's a square thing in a relatively small room. That's it. It's the only comparison you can make here.
Alcatraz power bombs Chaos through the table. He's bleeding from the beer, and Alcatraz gets the pin.
Out of nowhere, it was kind of a lame finish after everything that happened. Yes, it's a power bomb through a table, but I was expecting fire or exploding coffins or electrocutions. It didn't feel like the finish was coming, but it did.
They cut back to the announcers, and they're eating sandwiches as the show goes off the air.
They're eating. So the two announcers, Klaus and Ernst, are eating Subway
The
sandwiches.
Quiznos sandwiches.
Quiznos.
Yeah.
So apparently Quiznos paid for some product placement here. They're eating Quiznos sandwiches loudly into the microphone as they're attempting to close the show, talking to the guys from the band Sparta. That may have been more strange than anything else we saw on the show, which is saying something.
There was also, so that was the end of the show. There was also what they would show on MTV.com at the time in 2007. Again, 2007, not a time where people were going to the internet for video.
Because it was basically like a flip book trying to watch video on the internet. So we talked about that a lot when we
ECW lost its television.
Exactly. Yeah. And we also referenced that in a very early episode of the podcast, I believe from season 2, that episode of Impact between the Fox Sportsnet era and the Spike TV era.
Yeah, so they would have an extra, like a web show there that was hosted by Lacey from Ring of Honor fame.
I was so excited to see Lacey from Ring of Honor, from IWA Mid-South before that. I will go to the ends of the earth saying that if Lacey came around 10 years later, it was women's wrestling in WWE and in the US in general was getting more steam and was presented more seriously, she would have been such a big star. She was good in the ring. She was a great cowardly heel. She was so good interacting with the crowd and getting crowd reactions. Such a shame that she didn't get to do more.
And she was a great host here for this show. Like I think she did a great job. Walk us through kind of what was this show? What did they cover?
It's mostly a recap. They recap everything we just saw, and then they kick it to one of two exclusive matches. This was Matt Classic. We got a Matt Classic match here against Scorpio Sky. It's also odd because one time they referred to him as Scorpio Sky Andrews, but then the rest of the time they refer to him as Scorpio Sky. The graphic just says Scorpio Sky. His gimmick is that he's like delusional that he's famous, but he's not. He comes out with his high school or his junior high school athletic awards. He's signing autographs for fans that aren't asking for him to sign autographs for them, which was kind of amusing. The match was really just an exhibition of Matt Classic doing great old school type of things. We see him hit a knee lift, Mr. Wrestling 2 style, which popped me big time, especially with the look and the mask. He hits a heart punch. The Andre the Giant butt bumps in the corner. He misses a top rope splash. Sky hits a pop-up Rana and a somersault plancha to the floor. He goes for a battering ram headbutt. Scorpio counters, hits a swinging implant DDT for the win on Matt Classic. And this is what popped me more than anything else on this entire show. Matt Classic, like any good old territory wrestler, kicks out at 3.00000001, nice. But still loses. I lost it. That right there was better than anything that man has ever done as Colt Cabana in 20 years in the wrestling business. Granted, there's only 9 or 10 episodes of this show, and I assume the character didn't go elsewhere. I would watch every episode just to see Matt Classic. He was amazing here.
From the F4W newsletter from Brian Alvarez, they did a recap of some of the highlights of the alternate commentary track on the Wrestling Society X Complete Series DVDs. And Dr. Keith Lipinski and Kevin Kleinrock did the commentary track. Some highlights that I picked out from the recap. Kleinrock noted that this was one of the best episodes that they did, episode 3, and there was a standing ovation in the control booth when it was finished. Vampiro's promo, he said, on Raw, this promo would have been several minutes, but MTV limits him to just 30 seconds for the promo.
Which
So
I think actually worked. You
I
don't
think so,
need long
too.
promos.
They discussed the Matt Classic video. Keith gave all the credit to Colt Cabana for the Matt Classic stuff. They also mentioned that they wanted to use season 1 to establish Matt Sydal and Lizzie Valentine as a couple, then introduce Cabana as Sydal's friend in season 2, and eventually do a love triangle gimmick. So they wanted to get Colt under a contract, but not debut him yet. So they threw a mask on him to kill time, and it became the greatest thing they ever did.
Yeah, it's amazing that was just something to kill time. It was by far the best thing on the show and the best thing they ever did.
And it basically happened by accident.
Yes, as things often do in wrestling.
And then they did confirm that Quiznos was sponsoring the show, thus the sandwich spot at the end. And they said they had to do a certain number of Quiznos spots throughout the season. Keith wanted one of them to be a sandwich that inexplicably exploded, which
that would have been amazing.
Yeah,
and we need the shakiest, zoomiest camera for that.
So that is Wrestling Society X.
We did have on Wrestling Society Extra one other match. Not a ton happened in it, but it's notable because Tyler Black, the man who would go on to be Seth Rollins, teamed with Jimmy Jacobs, the man who was then and is still now my least favorite wrestler ever.
+1 over here. Yeah,
they teamed up to take on a truly reprehensible wrestler in Joey Ryan and the aforementioned Disco Machine. Not much of a match. Really, the story was that the Jimmy Jacobs emo character was taken, I guess it's a logical or illogical endpoint in Wrestling Society X, in that he was so emo that he felt bad about hurting his opponents. And so he didn't want to do moves, and Tyler Black had to convince him to do moves. Not much to this. The finish, Tyler Black has Disco Machine up in sort of a cradle shock position. Jimmy Jacobs goes for a senton off the top to land on Machine while he's on Black's shoulders. I assume he was supposed to hit him, but he doesn't. He basically completely misses. Black hits the cradle shock anyway and gets the win. So that's that. They ran down what would be on the following week's show, and that was it for the extra edition of the episode.
Favorite thing on this show?
It's tough. I went into this expecting to not like it, just like I didn't like it as a kid. As what, like a 25-year-old kid watching this. I enjoyed it far more than I did back then. I've lightened up to some degree as a wrestling fan since then. Well, I still don't like a lot of comedy. It's a valid point in my serious wrestling.
Yes,
but
okay, agreed. Yeah.
I have lightened up to the point where everything you described this as being an absurdist take on professional wrestling, that the entirety of it is in that universe, to use that word. I can appreciate that for what it is and get some enjoyment out of that. And I definitely did here with this. That being said, the in-ring style of just all flash and no substance really wasn't my deal, but the promos were great. The Matt Classic promo package was my favorite thing on the show. And my second favorite thing on the show was the Vampiro promo to open.
Yeah, both of those things for me were great. I thought that the spectacle of the opener was like, when it comes to the in-ring stuff.
Yeah.
I thought the opener was really good. I mean, you've got Teddy Hart and Matt Cross doing their thing, and
they were born to be doing their thing in this type of company because they are spot guys who do spots better than almost anyone and don't do much of anything in between, and they didn't have to do any in betweens here.
Yes, and we got an electrocution, which I was like, oh, this is exciting.
We got two. We got an electrocution, and then we got a waterlogged electrocution. So you got more bang for your buck, so to speak.
So, least favorite thing on this show.
Oh, without a doubt, no question. It's Fabian, the ring announcer. Horrible. Eject him into the sun, never to be seen again.
Yeah, I'm gonna say having Sparta in the announce. So I already don't need 4 guys in the announce booth, let alone this band who's talking about the Von Erichs and such. So yeah, this was not necessary at all. That was probably one of my least favorite things on the show. In addition, I'd say, kind of I get that they were trying to do like a Mexican soap opera type of feel for that backstage promo with Aguilera and Munoz, but I don't think that landed very
It,
well to set up that match.
it did not, particularly when you look at the other backstage or promo stuff that we just talked about, with how great the Matt Classic package was and how great the
Yeah.
Vampiro promo was. This seemed like
I get what they were trying to do, but it just
Yes.
didn't land for me. But
it felt like third-rate weekly TNA backstage stuff.
Yep. So, yeah, with that, we're going to call it a podcast. Now, I mentioned that we're going to do a companion bonus podcast to this one over in the bonus feed. We have a bonus feed over at patreon.com/wrestling at random. Or if you're an Apple Podcast subscriber, right in the podcast feed you're looking at right now, there are bonus content. You can subscribe by pushing that button right there. Or go to patreon.com/wrestling at random. Subscribe there as well. It unlocks all of the bonus content, not just the upcoming shows here, but all previous 100 or so episodes that we have in the bonus content. All of that is unlocked for you for one low price. You get that, and you'll get the companion piece to this podcast, our interview, Dr. Keith Lipinski, going in depth some more on Wrestling Society X, what it was like to be part of it, and that will be hitting your bonus content feed here in the next couple of weeks. So make sure you're looking out for that. If you're not listening in linear fashion, because you don't have to, you can pick and choose the episodes you want to listen to in whatever order. It's evergreen content. If you just got to this episode, it might be in your bonus content already. Go check it out right now. Go subscribe. Go check it out and get a full companion piece to the free feed show that you just listened to right here.
Yeah, absolutely. And as much as it may shock people, considering how much time I think you and I are both going to need to emotionally digest the 35-40 minutes of wrestling that we just watched, we will not be off next week. If you're listening in linear fashion, we will have a new episode. We will process what we saw here, and I assume the randomizer will pick something a bit more normal for us to watch, but it's season 4, so you never know.
Don't challenge the randomizer.
I am challenging the randomizer right now. Give us something crazier than Wrestling Society X. I believe in it.
All right, and with that, we are going to wrap it up. We want to hear your thoughts and we want to interact with you. So make sure you're following us via social media at Wrestle at Random for both Twitter and Instagram, Facebook.com/wrestling at random as well. All those links, the ways to subscribe, and all of the bonus content information. All those links are available to you at the website, wrestlingatrandom.com. It's got the entire back catalog of this podcast, all 4 seasons. And season 4, we also have a YouTube channel. So if you want to watch Adam and I do podcasts here, and you can also give us a subscribe there. Even if you're an audio-only listener, throwing us a subscribe over at the YouTube channel helps us over there as well. So make sure you're subscribe to the YouTube channel. Season 4, we have the video feed as well. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. We're calling it a podcast. Adam, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Dr. Keith Lipinski, for this for bringing us this episode, for producing this episode of Wrestling Society X. And yeah, I'm looking forward to / really enjoyed the interview with Dr. Keith Lipinski, depending on when people are listening right now.
I want to thank everyone for listening. Talk to you again